The stars looked different from the observation deck of Earth Station Alpha. Susan Mills stared through the reinforced glass as the alien ship approached. The vessel moved with impossible grace, its hull shimmering with colors not found in human art. As head of xenobiology, Susan had been preparing for this moment her entire career. First contact with an advanced species that called themselves the Volari. Susan checked her uniform one last time, smoothing down the crisp blue fabric. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was history in the making. The first official meeting between humans and an alien race commander. Diane Porter entered the observation deck, her face serious, but eyes bright with excitement. "Are you ready, Doctor?" she asked Susan. Nodded, "I think so." Nervous but ready. The station received the first Volari transmission 3 months ago. A simple greeting followed by a request to meet. The world governments had scrambled to prepare, selecting Susan and 9 other specialists for. The contact team Commander Porter oversaw the operation with military precision, but even she could not hide her excitement. The alien ship docked with barely a sound. The station computer announced a successful seal between the vessels. Susan, Commander. Porter and the rest of the team assembled in the main airlock chamber. The inner door remains sealed until we confirm atmosphere compatibility. Susan reminded everyone, the aliens have provided their environmental data, but we need to verify. The team waited as sensors analyzed the air from the alien ship. After several tense minutes, the computer gave the all-clear. Susan nodded to Porter, who activated the door mechanism. The airlock slid open, revealing 3 tall figures. Their bodies were slender and graceful, covered in what appeared to be flowing silver fabric. Their skin had a faint purple tint, and their forearms moved with perfect coordination. Most striking were their eyes, large, almond-shaped, and filled with swirling gold patterns. Tallest alien stepped forward and spoke, her voice melodic and clear. "We greet you, humans of Earth. I am Ilara, first scholar of the Volari Collective. We come seeking knowledge and exchange." Susan stepped forward as planned. "I am Susan Mills, xenobiologist. We welcome you to Earth Station Alpha and look forward to peaceful exchange." The alien named Ilara tilted her head, studying Susan with those swirling golden eyes. "We have observed your broadcasts for many cycles. Your species fascinates us. You are young yet remarkably adaptive." The Volari delegation moved into the station with fluid grace. Their movements seemed almost choreographed, each step precise and elegant. 2 more. Volari introduced themselves as Celine and Lyra, scholars specializing in biology and culture. The team escorted their visitors to the specially prepared conference room. The Volari sat on the offered chairs. Though Susan noticed they seemed uncomfortable with the human furniture, Ilara placed a crystalline device on the table. It projected a holographic display showing Earth. "We have studied your world from afar," she said. "Your species has survived multiple extinction-level events, persisted through ice ages, plagues, and wars. You have adapted and thrived under conditions that would destroy many civilizations. This resilience interests us greatly." Susan exchanged glances with Porter. This was unexpected. Most of the team had assumed the advanced aliens would be interested in human technology, not their survival. "Instinct, we simply do what we must to survive," Susan replied carefully. Ilara leaned forward, her 4 hands making complex gestures. "That is precisely what interests us. What you call simply doing what you must, we call extraordinary determination. Drive to continue. Despite overwhelming odds is rare among sentient species." The meeting continued for hours. The Volari asked detailed questions about human history, focusing on times of crisis and recovery. They seemed particularly interested in how humans responded to fear and threat. When the formal meeting concluded, Porter assigned quarters to the visitors. Susan returned to her lab to review the preliminary biological data collected during their interaction. The Volari had allowed basic scans but requested more invasive studies. Wait until trust was established. Susan worked late into the night station time analyzing the scan results. The Volari biology was fascinating. Their cellular structure suggested they evolved on a world with minimal environmental threats. Their nervous systems showed none of the fight-or-flight responses common to Earth creatures. Her computer chimed with an incoming message. Susan looked up surprised to see Alara at her lab door. "May I enter?" the alien asked. Susan quickly stood. "Of course, please come in." Alara glided into the lab, her movements silent. Her golden eyes took in the equipment and displays with apparent interest. "I hope I am not disturbing your work." "Not at all." Susan gestured to a chair. "I was just reviewing your physiological data." "Fascinating biology," Alara sat gracefully. "I came to continue our conversation privately. My colleagues are resting. Our species requires less sleep than yours." Susan nodded, waiting for the alien to continue. "Must be direct," Alara said. "Our interest in humanity goes beyond scientific curiosity. We need your help." Susan blinked, surprised by the admission. "Help with what?" The Valeri folded her four hands in her lap. "My species has existed for over 50,000 of your years. We developed interstellar travel when your ancestors were still using stone tools. We have mapped a quarter of this galaxy and contacted dozens of sentient species. We have technologies you cannot yet imagine. Yet despite all this, we face extinction," Alara continued. "Our population declines with each generation. Our people lose purpose. Our greatest minds turn inward, seeking virtual pleasures rather than exploring the universe. We lack something fundamental, something your species possesses in abundance. What do we have that you could possibly need?" Susan asked, genuinely confused. Alara leaned forward. "The will to survive against all odds, the ability to face insurmountable challenges and persist. Your species knows fear intimately, yet you do not let it paralyze you. You transform it into determination." Susan struggled to process this. The advanced aliens needed human help, not for technology, but for psychological resilience. "We evolved on a world with no predators," Alara explained. "Our planet had stable climate, minimal tectonic activity, and abundant resources. Our development was peaceful and cooperative. We never faced extinction-level threats until we began exploring beyond our world. Now we encounter dangers. We have no instinctual framework to understand our people retreat, rather than adapt." Susan considered this. The human fight-or-flight response evolved over millions of years. It was hardwired into their biology and psychology. Could such a thing be taught? "I need to understand better," Susan said. "Why approach us now? What specific threat do you face?" Alara touched her crystalline device. A holographic display appeared showing a spiral galaxy. "The universe is not empty," she said. "There are forces ancient and powerful. Some are not friendly to young species like yours. Others are hostile to all life. We encountered one such force 20 of your years ago. The experience nearly destroyed our civilization. We retreated, sealed our borders, and debated extinction." Susan felt a chill. "Is this force threatening Earth?" "Not yet," Alara replied. "But eventually, yes. Nothing in this galaxy remains hidden forever. We came to warn you, but also to learn. From our observations, your species might have the psychological tools to survive what is coming." "What exactly is coming?" Susan asked, her scientific curiosity battling with growing concern. Alara stood moving to the lab window. She gazed at the stars. "Something older than either of our civilizations. Something that consumes, rather than communicates. We call them the void. They exist partly in dimensions we cannot fully perceive. They do not negotiate or reason. They simply absorb." Susan processed this information. The implication that humanity might have something to offer, an advanced species, was both flattering and terrifying. "What exactly do you want from us?" she asked. Alara turned, her golden eyes swirling with complex patterns. "We propose an exchange. You teach us how humans face fear and persist through hopeless scenarios. We teach you what we know of the void and give you technologies to help prepare." Susan knew this decision was far beyond her authority. This would involve world governments, military leaders, scientists from every field. But she also knew what her answer would be, what any human would say when faced with an existential threat. "We will help if we can," she said. "Tell me more about the void." 1 month after first contact, Earth Station Alpha had transformed into a hub of unprecedented activity. Susan spent her days in intense knowledge exchange sessions with the Valerie. The station crew had expanded to include top scientists from various fields, all working to understand the alien threat and technology. Today, Susan sat with Alara in the newly designated Cultural Center, a large space converted from a storage bay, now filled with screens, displays, and holographic projectors. It was here that the humans shared their history, art, literature, and psychology with the visitors. Alara watched intently as Susan queued up the next presentation. "This one might be difficult to understand," Susan warned. "These are recordings of human responses to disaster, both natural and man-made. The emotional content is intense." Alara nodded her 4 hands, making a gesture. Susan had learned meant readiness. "Show me, I need to understand." Susan activated the display. The screen showed footage from historical disasters, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods, and fires. But more importantly, it showed people rescuing strangers from burning buildings, people forming human chains to save others from drowning, people rebuilding homes after everything was lost. The recordings continued, showing war zones with medics rushing to help the wounded, civilians sheltering children, people standing up to tanks with nothing but courage. The final clip showed smaller personal moments: a woman giving birth during a blackout, a child learning to walk after losing limbs, a family celebrating a holiday in a refugee camp. When the presentation ended, Susan turned to find Alara trembling. Her purple skin had paled, and her golden eyes had dimmed considerably. "Are you all right?" Susan asked, concerned. The Valerie took several moments to respond. When she did, her voice was unsteady. "You face such horrors regularly, yet continue to find joy, to create, to love." How Susan considered the question. It had never occurred to her that the human capacity for hope might be unique. "We don't really have a choice," she said. "We can give up and die, or we can keep going. Most choose to keep going." In the neighboring lab, Commander Porter worked with Celine and Lyra examining the Valerie technology. The aliens had brought examples of their defensive systems, weapons, and communication devices. All were centuries beyond human capability. Porter looked up from a holographic display showing Valerie shield technology. "So this could protect a city from direct energy weapons." Celine nodded, her forearms manipulating the controls. "With modifications, yes, the principles are transferable to your technology, though implementation will require materials you have not yet synthesized." Porter frowned. "Not very helpful, if we can build it." Lyra stepped forward, producing a small crystalline object from her flowing silver garment. "We anticipated this limitation. This contains molecular templates for 57 new materials. Your scientists can use it to create small amounts sufficient for prototyping. Eventually, you will develop manufacturing processes." Porter took the crystal carefully. "This is extremely generous. Why share such advanced technology?" The 3 Valerie exchanged glances, a form of silent communication. Susan had noted previously. Celine spoke after the exchange. "We have observed your military history. Humans fight most effectively when defending others, not just themselves. This technology may help you survive long enough to do what your species does best: adapt and overcome." In the station's command center, the human diplomatic team met with representatives from Earth governments via secure video link. The station director, Karen Hayes, led the briefing. The Valerie have shared data about 17 previous encounters with the entities they call the Void, she explained. All followed the same pattern. First, subtle disruptions in communication and energy systems, then increasing incidents of mass hallucination and psychological disturbance. Finally, a physical manifestation described as a darkness that absorbs everything. No species has successfully repelled a full manifestation. The Chinese representative leaned forward. "Have they provided any effective countermeasures?" Iggy's nodded. "Some. Their technology can detect early signs of void influence. Their shields can block certain effects, but they readily admit their approach has been primarily defensive retreat and isolation. They believe humanity's more aggressive, adaptive response may offer better results. The meeting continued for hours as the implications were debated. Some officials remained skeptical. Others wanted immediate implementation of alien technology. All agreed the situation required unprecedented global cooperation. Later that evening, Susan found Alara in the observation lounge gazing at Earth. The alien stood motionless, her forearms at her sides as she watched the blue planet rotate below. "Beautiful, ain't it?" Susan said, joining her. Alara turned, "My, people once felt that way about new worlds. The wonder of exploration. When did you lose that?" "We had it once," Alara replied. "When our civilization was young. But success breeds complacency. We solved all our physical problems, eliminated disease, poverty, conflict. We created a perfect society, but in doing so we lost something essential. The drive that comes from struggle. The meaning found in overcoming adversity." Susan considered this. The idea that too much success could weaken a species was fascinating, yet troubling. "Do you think this is why you struggled against the void?" Alara made a gesture Susan had learned indicated deep sadness. "Perhaps we encountered them first, 200 cycles ago. One of our exploration vessels disappeared. We investigated and found nothing. Then another vanished. Then entire outposts went silent. We retreated, studied, strengthened our defenses. But with each encounter, we lost more. We began to question why we should resist. Why not accept extinction if existence had no purpose?" Susan felt a chill at the nihilism in Alara's words. "That when you decided to seek help," Alara turned her golden eyes bright in the dim light. "Yes. We observed many species. Most reacted as we did with retreat and despair. But humans, your broadcasts, showed a species that faced extinction-level events regularly, yet continued to find meaning in existence. You live such brief lives, experience such suffering, yet you create art, make discoveries, sacrifice for future generations. You will never see the..." Alien moved closer, her voice intensifying. "We need to understand this quality. Your ability to face the darkness and not surrender to despair. We believe it may be the key to defeating the void, not just surviving it." Susan felt the weight of the aliens' words, the responsibility they placed on humanity. "What if we fail? What if this human quality isn't enough?" Alara made a gesture Susan had not seen before. "Something like determination mixed with acceptance. Then we face extinction together. But we will have tried that itself is a victory of sorts. For my people to die fighting rather than fading away would restore meaning to our existence." The next morning, Susan met with the full team of human specialists and the 3 Valeri representatives in the main conference room. Karen Hayes addressed the group. "Based on the Valeri data and our analysis, we believe Earth has approximately 5 years before the first signs of void influence reach our solar system," she said. "The aliens have agreed to establish a permanent embassy and technology exchange program. They will provide defensive technology while we share our psychological and cultural adaptations." Susan looked around the room, seeing the determination on each face. She thought about the enormous task ahead. Teaching an ancient species how to face fear, how to find hope in darkness, how to keep fighting when victory seemed impossible. Hayes continued. "Teams will be assigned specific aspects of the exchange. Susan Mills will head the Psychological Resilience Program. Commander Porter will oversee technology integration. The Valeri have agreed to transport human representatives to their homeworld to establish a corresponding human embassy." Alara stood addressing the humans. "We have existed for 50,000 years, yet we come to you as students. Your species is young, barely space-capable, technologically primitive by our standards. Yet you possess wisdom. We have lost the wisdom of survival against impossible odds. In exchange for your teaching, we offer our technology, our knowledge of the galaxy, and our commitment to stand with you against what comes." The meeting broke into specialized groups. Susan found herself with Alara and two human psychologists planning the resilience training program. The Valeri had already selected 300 of their people to serve as the first students. These would then become teachers to their own kind. Susan looked at her notes. The program would include everything from military training to art therapy, literature, philosophy, religion. All the ways humans had found to face darkness and find meaning. They would teach the aliens what it meant to be human, to hope, to fight, to love. Despite knowing loss was inevitable. "Do you think it will work?" she asked Alara. "Can your people learn these things?" The alien considered her question. "I do not know. But for the first time in centuries, my people have purpose. That alone is significant. We had forgotten what it meant to have something worth fighting for. You have reminded us." 6 months into the exchange program, progress exceeded expectations. The Valeri learned quickly, absorbing human history, psychology, and art with astonishing speed. Susan now divided her time between Earth Station Alpha and the newly established human embassy on the Valeri homeworld Lumina. Susan stood in the Great Hall of the Valeri Learning Center, watching as Alara led a group of 50 aliens through an exercise. The hall, enormous by human standards, was filled with holographic displays, showing scenes of human crisis and response today. Alara focused on what humans called courage. The aliens stood in a circle, their forearms linked as they shared emotional responses to the images, something previously unheard of in their culture. Susan felt pride seeing her alien friend lead the session. 6 months ago, Alara had been a clinical observer. Now she spoke with passion, her golden eyes bright with purpose. The images now display what humans call selfless courage. Alara explained to her, "Students, the concept of risking personal harm to save others without calculation of benefit. This behavior appears throughout human history regardless of culture or time period." A younger Valerie named Terrace raised a hand. "But is this not simply inefficient? Would resources not be better preserved by logical assessment of survival probability?" Susan smiled, remembering asking similar questions when she first joined the military. The logical approach versus the human one. Alara responded with patience. "I once thought as you do. But consider the psychological impact. When humans witness acts of selfless courage, it inspires similar behavior. It creates bonds stronger than logic. It gives meaning to existence, even in the face of certain death." Another Valeri spoke. "Each time these humans faced extinction, they emerged stronger, more determined. They remember these acts of courage through stories, art monuments. They draw strength from memory." Susan nodded. That was exactly what they hoped the Valeri would understand. That facing darkness together gave meaning that transcended survival. After the session, Susan met with Alara in the gardens surrounding the learning center. The Valeri homeworld was beautiful, its landscapes sculpted over thousands of years into perfect harmony. Strange crystal trees captured sunlight, transforming it into melodic tones. The air carried scents like nothing on earth. "You are becoming an excellent teacher," Susan said. As they walked the winding path, Alara made a gesture of modest acknowledgement. "I merely share what I have learned from you, but I believe it is working. Our first graduates have already begun teaching others across our 12 worlds. The Council reports increased voluntary participation beyond our expectations." Susan stopped by a fountain that flowed upward against gravity. "Has there been resistance?" Some, Alara admitted. "Our oldest generations question the need for change. Our safest worlds see no reason to embrace discomfort. But the younger ones, they embrace these human concepts with surprising enthusiasm. They form emotional bonds, create art expressing fear and hope. They volunteer for dangerous research." Susan had seen evidence of this change. Valeri, who once spent their lives in comfortable isolation, now gathered in groups, shared meals, created music and art together. Their society was transforming, becoming more human in the best ways while maintaining their own identity. Back on Earth, human scientists worked with Valeri technology, making breakthroughs that would have taken centuries to achieve. Otherwise, Commander Porter oversaw the integration of alien defensive systems into Earth satellites. The first early warning network designed to detect signs of void influence was nearly operational in her temporary quarters on Lumina. Susan reviewed reports from Earth teams around the world implemented Valeri technology while adapting it to human needs. The aliens were surprised by how quickly humans modified their designs, improving them in unexpected ways. Her communication pad signaled an incoming message from Karen Hayes. Susan, the mission director, began. "We have a situation. The Moscow team reports unusual energy readings consistent with early void influence. Valeri. Consultants confirm the pattern. The timeline has accelerated. We need you and Alara back at headquarters immediately." Susan felt her heart rate increase. 5 years had suddenly become now. She sent confirmation and began packing her essential equipment. She found Alara in the Learning Center archives. The alien was studying human military history, specifically how outmatched forces had prevailed against superior enemies. "We have a situation," Susan said, showing Alara the message. The alien read quickly, her golden eyes darkening. "Void signatures near your planet. Already. The patterns indicate observation only, but still. This is much sooner than our models predicted. We need to return to Earth," Susan said. "The team needs your expertise." Within hours, they boarded a Valerie transport ship. The aliens had recently granted humans access to their faster-than-light technology, though only with Valerie pilots. Susan watched through the observation window as Lumina grew smaller, feeling both awe and anxiety. This beautiful world might soon face the same threat as Earth. The journey to Earth took only 3 days rather than the months required by human spacecraft. Susan and Ilara used the time to develop response protocols based on previous void encounters and human crisis management techniques. When they arrived, Earth Station Alpha had transformed into a global command center. Representatives from all major nations worked alongside Valeri advisors. Screens displayed data from the new sensor network, showing subtle energy anomalies over northern Russia. Karen Hayes greeted them as they entered the command center. "You made good time," she said. "The situation has developed. The Moscow anomalies disappeared after 2 days, but we detected similar patterns, near Beijing then Cairo, each lasting approximately 48 hours. Then vanishing. Alara studied the data displays, her 4 hands moving rapidly across controls. "This is consistent with preliminary observation. A testing of defenses. The void studies, resistance before committing resources." Commander Porter joined them, pointing to a global display. "We have implemented the detection grid as the Valeri suggested." She nodded respectfully to Alara. "The shield technology is proving more challenging. Our power systems can't sustain the energy requirements for more than short bursts." Alara made a gesture of understanding. "We anticipated this limitation. Our engineers have modified designs based on your available technology. The new systems sacrifice coverage for reliability. They should protect your major population centers." Susan reviewed the latest psychological data from both human and Valeri sources. The exchange program had expanded beyond all expectations. 3,000 Valeri now lived among humans, learning firsthand about crisis response resilience and hope. In return, over 500 humans studied on Valeri worlds, bringing back knowledge and technology. The command center buzzed with activity as teams coordinated global response plans. Susan found herself impressed by how quickly humanity had united in the face of this threat. Old rivalries set aside, at least temporarily. Nations that had been enemies now shared resources and information. Later that evening, Susan stood with Ilara on the observation deck, watching Earth rotate below. They had spent the day in briefings planning coordination between human and Valeri forces. "Do you think we're ready?" Susan asked. Ilara was silent for a long moment. "No," she said finally. "But neither were we, and we had thousands of years to prepare. The difference is that you humans expect struggle. You plan for it, you even find purpose in it. My people are learning this mindset." Susan considered this. The Valeri had given humanity technological advances that might have taken centuries to develop on their own. In return, humans had given the aliens something equally valuable: a reason to fight. A way to find meaning in existence, even knowing it might end. That night, Susan dreamed of darkness, a void that consumed everything in its path. Stars, planets, civilizations, all absorbed into nothingness. She woke, gasping for breath, her heart racing. When she checked her communication pad, she found an urgent message. The sensors had detected a major anomaly forming in orbit around Mars. Susan rushed to the command center, finding it already filled with personnel. Screens showed a distortion in space near the red planet, not visible to normal sensors but clearly apparent on the Valeri detection. Gridalera stood with the science team, her expression grave by human standards. The void manifestation is larger than any previously documented, she explained. It appears to be studying your solar system, learning its defenses. Hayes turned to Susan. What do our psychological models predict for public response when this becomes visible from Earth? Susan had been preparing for this question for months, working with experts in mass psychology and crisis management. The truth is, we don't know, she admitted. Nothing in human history compares to this. But based on previous global crises, we expect initial panic, followed by adaptation. Most humans respond to clear threats with cooperation, not continued panic, especially with proper leadership. An information porter joined them, pointing to defense readiness displays. Our orbital platforms are at 90% capacity. The ground-based shields can protect major cities for up to 72 hours with current power systems. Susan watched as humanity prepared for its greatest challenge. The room, full of people from different nations' backgrounds and beliefs all working together, reminded her of what Alara had said about human resilience. They expected struggle. They prepared for it. They found purpose in it. The void manifestation near Mars grew larger with each passing hour. Its presence defied normal physics, appearing as a region where light and matter simply ceased to exist. Valeri sensors showed energy patterns consistent with previous encounters, but at a scale none had witnessed before. Susan stood in the command center, reviewing reports from around the world. The first visible effects had begun. Unusual dreams reported by millions, sleep disturbances, feelings of dread without apparent cause, animals behaving strangely. These matched the early warning signs from Valeri. Records Alara entered carrying data crystals. The Council has sent all remaining records of previous encounters. She said these include information previously classified. Their analysis suggests this manifestation is a scout, not a full invasion. Susan accepted the crystals with gratitude. That gives us time to prepare. Not much. Ilara cautioned. Days, perhaps weeks. The scout studies defenses, communication patterns, psychological weaknesses. Once it reports back, the main entity will follow. Hayes joined them with Commander Porter and representatives from major Earth governments. The Russian defense minister spoke first. The anomaly is now visible to our instruments even without Valeri technology. Our scientists estimate it will be visible to the naked eye within 48 hours. Public panic is inevitable. The Chinese representative nodded. We have implemented the emergency protocols as agreed. Shelters are prepared. Information networks ready. Military and emergency services on highest alert. Hayes turned to Susan. Your assessment, Doctor. Susan took a deep breath. Based on our models, we expect 3 waves of public response, she explained. First, panic and fear. This will peak when the anomaly becomes visible from Earth. Second, a period of adaptation as people process the reality. Third, either resignation or determination, depending on how we manage information and leadership. The psychological warfare is as important as the technological. Porter added, we know from Valeri records that the void influences minds, creates hallucinations, exploits fear. Ilara confirmed this. The entity feeds on despair. Civilizations that surrender to hopelessness are consumed more quickly. Those who resist with purpose last longer. Our mistake was isolation. Your human tendency toward collective action may prove advantageous. The meeting continued as they refined global response plans. Each nation would maintain sovereignty but coordinate. Through the newly formed Earth Defense Council, the Valeri provided technology and knowledge while humans contributed strategic planning and psychological resilience training. As predicted, the void became visible from Earth 2 days later. A dark spot near Mars, visible even to amateur telescopes. News networks worldwide carried the story governments released, coordinated statements explaining the phenomenon and outlining preparation measures. Susan monitored public response with a team of psychologists and sociologists. Initial fear was significant, but the carefully crafted messages helped channel it into action. People stocked supplies, secured homes, and followed instructions. But they also did something the Valeri found surprising. They came together, churches, mosques, temples, and other gathering places filled with people seeking comfort and meaning. Neighbors checked on each other. Volunteers flooded emergency services. Community events sprang up spontaneously. Artists created music, paintings, poetry about the coming darkness. "This is extraordinary," Alara said, watching footage of candlelight vigils across the globe. "The response is nothing like what we observed in other species." They turned toward each other, not away. Susan nodded. "This is humanity at its best. When the threat is clear and shared, we unite." On the 7th day, the Void Scout began to move. It left Mars' orbit, traveling toward Earth at increasing speed. The defensive grid activated as planned. Valeri shields, combined with human weapon systems, formed a layered defense. Satellites monitored the approaching darkness, while ground-based systems prepared for impact. Susan and Alara worked with their teams to prepare for the psychological effects. The Void would attempt to break human resolve by exploiting fears, creating hallucinations, turning people against each other. The defense required not just technology, but mental discipline. As the entity approached Earth, it became visible during daylight, a growing shadow against the blue sky. People gathered in streets and parks looking up. Some prayed, some sang. Some simply stood in silent witness. The first attack came at night. The Void entity passed through the outer defense grid, absorbing several satellites. It paused in high Earth orbit, then sent tendrils of darkness toward major cities. The shields activated as planned, glowing barriers of energy blocking the probing attacks. But the physical defense was only part of the assault. People across the globe reported nightmares, visions of loved ones dead or dying. Sudden, overwhelming feelings of hopelessness. Emergency services were flooded with calls, hospitals filled with patients experiencing panic attacks and psychosomatic symptoms. Susan directed the psychological response team. Trained counselors flooded communication networks with guidance techniques for distinguishing hallucinations from reality, methods to maintain emotional stability. Community leaders implemented the protocols. They had practiced providing calm centers in the growing storm. In the command center, Hayes monitored global defense systems. "The shields are holding," she reported, "but power consumption is higher than projected. We can maintain protection for approximately 60 hours at current levels." Porter studied tactical displays. "The entity appears to be testing each shield, looking for weaknesses. It focuses attacks, then withdraws when it meets resistance." Classic probing behavior. Ilara worked with the Valeri. Contingent now expanded to over 100 advisors. Their homeworld had sent their best scientists and warriors, abandoning centuries of isolation to stand with humanity. "The Void is learning," she explained. "Its attacks grow more sophisticated with each probe. We must adapt equally quickly." The assault continued for days. The entity probed, defenses withdrew, regrouped, then attacked again. Each cycle, it adjusted, trying new approaches. The shields held, but power reserves dwindled. Engineers worked frantically to improve efficiency, but the timeline for failure remained unchanged. The psychological battle proved equally challenging. The Void exploited fears, deepest insecurities, darkest thoughts. People reported seeing lost, loved ones hearing, voices urging them to surrender to despair. The training programs helped, but nothing could fully prepare humanity for this assault on their minds. Susan worked herself to exhaustion, coordinating the mental health response. When she finally took a break, Alara found her in the observation lounge. "You must rest," the alien said. "Your species requires sleep more than mine." Susan smiled weakly. "So do you? From what I can tell." Ilara made a gesture of acknowledgement. "I have learned many human habits, including the value of rest. But I wish to share something first." She activated a display showing global communication patterns. "Despite everything, Despite the fear and hallucinations, people continue to connect. She said, communications between communities, families, friends have increased by 300%. The void seeks to isolate, but humans respond by reaching out. Susan nodded. That was the core of their defense strategy. Not just shields and weapons, but connection. The understanding that facing darkness together gave strength, purpose, meaning. On the 10th day, the entity launched its strongest attack. Yet dark tendrils simultaneously struck shields protecting every major city. Power systems overloaded, backup generators engaged, but engineers reported they could maintain protection for only a few more hours. In the command center, alarms sounded as systems approached critical limits. Hayes coordinated the global response, ordering power redirected from non-essential services. Emergency teams stood ready to evacuate threatened areas. Porter studied tactical displays with growing concern. It's concentrating attacks on specific points now, he said. Not random probes, but coordinated strikes. It's learning our defense patterns. A massive power surge hit the station as the entity tested the shields protecting their command center. Lights flickered, equipment sparked. Engineers reported shield integrity at 60%, and falling Alara studied the data with intense focus. This behavior is new, she said. In previous encounters, the Void maintained consistent attack patterns, but this entity adapts quickly. It responds to our defenses with new approaches. Susan realized what this meant. It's learning from us. Just as we learn and adapt, it does the same. The implications were staggering. If the Void could adapt to human defenses, learn from human strategies, they might have less time than they thought. The psychological attacks intensified. Reports came in of mass hallucinations entire. Communities experiencing the same visions. People seeing loved ones beckoning them to walk into darkness. Children describing identical nightmares. The mental health network struggled to maintain support as counselors themselves experienced the effects. Susan implemented the final phase of their psychological defense plan. Communities organized into support groups. Each person responsible for monitoring others. Reality checking became standard practice. Medication was distributed to those most vulnerable. People shared techniques for maintaining hope in darkness. Songs, stories, rituals in the command center. Susan Porter and Alara gathered with Hayes to assess their dwindling options. The entity had systematically tested every defense, adapted to every countermeasure. The shields would fail within hours. Evacuation plans could save some lives, but billions would remain vulnerable. 3 months after the scout retreated, Earth prepared for the greater threat to come. The Valeri Council sent additional ships, technology, and personnel, their isolation policy abandoned in favor of alliance. The exchange programs expanded as both species recognized their complementary strengths. Susan now led the Combined Psychological Defense Initiative, a global organization dedicated to preparing humanity for the coming darkness. Their headquarters in Geneva, coordinated with centers on all continents and the Valeri homeworld today. Susan reviewed progress reports with Alara. Their friendship had deepened through shared struggle. The alien now understood human emotions well enough to recognize Susan's concern. The reports show promising results, Alara said. 80% of test populations maintain psychological stability even under simulated void influence. The resilience training is effective. Susan nodded, but her worry remained visible. Our models suggest the main entity will be at least 10 times stronger than the Scout. Its attack will last not days but months, perhaps years. Can we maintain hope that long? Alara made a gesture Susan had learned meant determination. One thing I have learned from humans is that theoretical limits rarely match reality. Your species consistently exceeds expectations, especially when protecting others. The command center alerted them to an incoming transmission from the Valeri homeworld. The Supreme Council rarely communicated directly, making this unusual. Susan and Alara hurried to the secure communication room, where Hayes already waited. The transmission began showing 5 elder Valeri, their crystalline headdresses marking their authority. Our scientists have completed analysis of the Scout entity. The lead counselor said, the data confirms our fears. The main void entity approaches. It will reach your solar system within 30 days. Hayes maintained her composure. Are your defense forces prepared to join ours as agreed? Thor. Counselor made a formal gesture of confirmation. Our fleet departs today with our most advanced technology and 10,000 of our finest warriors. But we bring something else. Something new. Our scientists and yours have created a weapon unlike any before. The transmission showed a massive device under construction, its design unlike anything Susan had seen before, combining Valeri crystalline technology with what appeared to be human elements. What is it? Susan asked. The counselor turned her ancient eyes toward Susan. It is the result of our exchange program. Not just technology, but philosophy. Our scientists called it impossible. A weapon powered by hope. The transmission explained the device harvested the electromagnetic patterns generated by sentient minds during states of extreme hope, determination, and courage. These patterns combined and amplified could disrupt the void entity's cohesion. The theory had emerged from studying how human brains responded differently to void influence than Valeri minds. The weapon requires both our species to operate. The counselor explained Valeri technology cannot harness these patterns alone, and human technology cannot amplify them sufficiently. Together, we create something neither could achieve alone. When the transmission ended, Hayes turned to Susan and Alara. Your assessment, Alara spoke first. The theory is sound, based on our new understanding of the void, but generating sufficient mental energy will require billions of minds aligned in purpose. Not identical thoughts, but shared determination. Susan considered the challenge. Coordinating global psychological response during the Scout attack had been difficult enough. This would require something far greater, a way to unite humanity, not in fear but in hope. The next weeks passed in frantic preparation. The Valeri fleet arrived, taking positions throughout the solar system. Earth defense systems integrated with alien technology. The Hope weapon, as people called it, was installed on a station in high Earth orbit. Susan developed protocols for what they called the Hope Network, a global system designed to create the necessary mental patterns at critical moments. Communities worldwide practiced the techniques combining meditation, prayer-focused intention, and other methods found effective in laboratory tests. Most important was authenticity. The patterns had to emerge from genuine hope, not manufactured emotion. This required a cultural shift, not just technical preparation. Susan worked with artists, musicians, and spiritual leaders to develop experiences that genuinely inspired hope across cultural differences. 2 days before the predicted arrival, Susan stood with Alara in the garden of their Geneva headquarters. The spring air carried the scent of flowers, birds sang, seemingly unaware of the approaching darkness. Do you ever wonder if we should have left your people in isolation? Susan asked. Sometimes I think we brought this threat to you. Alara turned her golden eyes reflecting the sunlight. We were never truly isolated, she said. The void would have found us eventually as it found others, but we would have faced it alone without purpose, without hope. You have given us both. Susan smiled. The exchange had indeed worked both ways. Human unpredictability, creativity, and emotional resilience combined with Valeri technology, patience, and wisdom. Each species stronger for knowing the other. The detection grid activated that night. The void entity had arrived earlier than predicted. Its massive presence eclipsed the Scout in every measure. Sensors showed it absorbing the outer planets, defense platforms, communication relays. Nothing seemed to slow its approach toward Earth. In the global command center now expanded to include both human and Valeri leaders, Hayes coordinated the defense response. The outer shield grid is activating. She reported all systems operational power reserves at maximum. Porter studied tactical displays. The entity moves differently than the Scout. More deliberately. It seems to be analyzing our defenses before engaging. Alara worked with her team monitoring the entity's energy patterns. This manifestation is far more complex than any previously recorded, she said. Its learning capacity appears exponential. The Valeri fleet engaged first, their ships forming a geometric pattern around the entity. They fired weapons that bent space, disrupted dimensional barriers, created localized time distortions. The entity paused in its approach, dark tendrils withdrawing briefly before lashing out with greater force. Several Valeri ships disappeared, completely absorbed into the darkness on Earth. The first effects began. Dreams darkened worldwide. Animals became agitated. Electronic systems experienced unexplained failures. The psychological assault had begun before the physical one. Susan activated the Hope Network communities gathered in designated spaces following the practiced protocols, not with rigid uniformity, but creative diversity. Some sang, some danced, some sat in silent meditation. The common element was focus on connection, possibility, and determination. The entity reached Mars orbit, consuming the defense platform stationed there. It paused as if studying the inner system. Then it divided smaller manifestations separated from the main mass heading toward Earth. From multiple vectors, Hayes ordered defensive redeployment. Shield configurations shifted to counter the new approach. The Hope weapon powered up, drawing energy from specialized stations worldwide. The first wave hit Earth's outer shields. Dark tendrils probed for weaknesses. The defense held, but sensors showed power consumption, far exceeding sustainable levels. The entity had learned from the scout, adapted to the random patterns that had proved effective before. The psychological assault intensified. People worldwide reported not just hallucinations, but physical symptoms, crushing despair, overwhelming fear, thoughts of surrender. The Hope Network countered. With connection, community, and shared purpose, the balance wavered hour by hour, region by region. In the command center, Susan monitored global psychological patterns. The effect is strongest where people are isolated, she reported. Communities maintaining physical connection show greater resistance. Ilara analyzed the data with her team. The entity targets communication. First, she observed, it seeks to isolate before consuming. This pattern appears consistent across all encounters. Hayes made the decision. Implement Phase 2. Phase 2 deployed Valeri communication technology to areas most affected, crystal transmitters that maintained connection regardless of physical barriers, communities linked through networks that the void could not disrupt. The eye. Psychological defense strengthened as isolation decreased. The entity responded with direct attacks on shield generators. Power systems worldwide strained to maintain protection. Engineers worked frantically to reroute resources, implement Valeri energy technology, create redundant systems, but the entity learned, adapted, focused its assault on critical nodes. 7 days into the attack, the first shields failed. Dark tendrils touched Earth's surface in remote areas. The affected regions reported the same progression. First electronic failure, then spreading despair, finally, a darkness that consumed everything it touched. Emergency evacuations began as the entity established footholds. The Hope weapon remained their last resort. Its systems, ready but requiring specific conditions to activate. The entity needed to be fully manifested, committed to attack and within range. The timing had to be perfect. Susan coordinated with Hope centers worldwide, preparing for the crucial moment. The mental patterns needed to be synchronized, not identical but harmonious. Each culture, each community contributing its unique expression of defiance and determination.